Hi everyone and welcome to my Wave of Light Monk T16 guide. This is by a good margin the best T16 Rift farmer in the game, and it actually doesn't really require that much to make it very good. And a lot of people specifically make monks to farm T16 Rifts because it's so fast and simply so strong compared to other classes. The main reason why it is that good is because of the combination of Engeum and Dashing Strike, which is just insane mobility, and there's also Tempest Rush on a monk, which is probably quite similar to this, but generally Wave of Light is considered like kind of the best of the best builds for T16 farming. So how does it work? We have the Wave of Light skill, and there's a lot of multipliers you can stack for this. There are the Pintos Bright Braces and the Kiyoshiro's Blade, and there's also the cubed weapon Incense Torch of the Grand Temple. All of these give you lots of damage buffs and also some utility, like you apply a slow, so it's like easy bait of the trapped application, for example. You get resource cost reduction and so on. We have Engeum with Dash, as I mentioned. This gives you all the mobility, and yes, it is an Engeum build, but this build is so fast that typically after you find the first elite, you shouldn't really run out of this effect. So generally you can just like dash around the entire time and your charges refill like almost instantly. So this is the core of the build, and you have to know that there's two different versions. One is the LoD version and one is the Sengoku version, and both of them work pretty well, and the LoD version is generally a lot stronger and a little bit more accessible because you can just throw together some random items after getting the core of the build and the LoD gem, and you're fine. And it also has more DPS. So this is generally considered the better option, especially like early on when you're like on low gear standard. But here's also Sengoku, and the big advantage of Sengoku is you can wear Sage and Canes especially. So if you really want to get a lot of keys, you can do this with Sengoku. You have the ability to go 6-piece with Sengoku and the Canes and Ring of Our Granger, and like this you can get 25% extra keys. So if your clear speed doesn't suffer very much from going the Sengoku route, then this is definitely a recommended way because you get a lot more keys. You have to farm way fewer rifts, and just increase your efficiency like this. The big problem that the Sengoku setup has is that you have to drop the Kiyoshiro's Blade, which is one of the multipliers for Wave of Light. So your damage becomes a lot weaker by like around a little more than half, I think. And you have to make sure that you play the build properly to actually keep your damage buffs up, because you also need to stack Sweeping Wind. And with Sweeping Wind, you have to hit something every few seconds or the buff drops. So at the start of Rift, you have to stack it up to 13 stacks. And then you have to keep it up either by attacking something or by pressing Sweeping Wind itself. So there's a bit more micromanagement involved, but generally you get the hang of it quite fast, and I've played a few runs and I was running 12k dexterity, which is still fairly low end. This is just getting all the pieces together essentially, nothing really crazy. And I was still doing pretty well, at least in solo T16 runs, and then also obliterating the Rift Guardian with the Cane Swap at the end. So continuing with the setup, we have the St. Archers plus the Squirts, so we have the shield and we have the damage buff from the amulet. We combine this with Gold Wrap and build with the Hoarder, and like this you'll be invincible and the enemies will never get through your shields. So as long as you engage an elite and it hits you once every 10 seconds, you're gonna have an infinite shield. And the other way of getting a shield is the mantra of healing. And we do the circular breathing rune here for some extra spirit regen, so that you can just passively regen up, because there's no generator in this setup. You only have passive spirit regen, but you can out-regen the resources you spend quite easily with this setup, so it shouldn't be a big problem. Yeah. Otherwise, there's the Tsokurin's Great Gaze, which is also a pretty strong helm, which makes it sort of vaporless cast on your enemy, so it becomes like a range skill instead of casting around you, and makes everything much easier to do, and also gives like a huge additive damage bonus of 150%. So that's a very nice helm, and almost like another multiplier item essentially. And the rest is kind of like random pieces. We have the illusory boots, I put them here, but it doesn't really matter. Same with the shoulders, there's nothing that really helps you. And also we have a ring here, Stone of Jordan, just another damage buff. And obviously the gems, we have to put with the Hoarder, as always in T16. We have Legacy of Dreams, which you need for the setup, and then we have the Bane of the Trapped. The slow from the Pintos Bright Bracer is actually applied before the damage, so you always get Bane of the Trapped effect, so it's quite nice. In the cube we have the Incense Torch, as I mentioned. We have the Nemesis Bracers to spawn the extra elites for progression, and we have the Obsidian Ring to get a little bit more cooldown in. You don't really need Obsidian Ring, so there's also kind of like an option where you can change it, but it makes it more smooth when you have like permanent epiphany uptime and so on, so you can just spam all your buttons. And talking about epiphany, here are the skills. So we take the inside rune here for more spirit regen. We have the blinding flash, but this is also like a skill that's not really required, so you can just take like anything here if you want. And also like the breath of heaven here, I just took this for like some mobility, but again you can take something like serenity if you want, for example, or any other skill that works for you. And the passives, we have the beacon of Etar for the cooldown, the near death experience, always nice to have a cheat death when you're farming torments in case your gold wrap drops. Seize the initiative is very strong, 30% attack speed, it's essentially up all the time, so this manages to improve your clear speed quite a bit. And the last passive is just like another choice. You can do momentum here for some extra damage. There's also the Chant of Resonance, which will make your resource management much easier when you have to spend the mantra a lot, and you also get extra regen from this. So this is like the other option I would recommend here. So for the Sengoku setup, not really much changes. You wear 5 pieces of the set. So we have the amulet, and you have to cube squirts this time. So in this setup, there is no obsidian ring. You have to wear the ring for a Granger instead. And yeah, as I said, the damage is a bit lower. You don't have the Kirishira's blade. There's also no Stone of Jordan, but you can make it good enough because simply the build is rather strong, and then it's gonna be fine. And again, we have the Soken's Grace to give us some damage here, and like this, you can kind of like squeeze out enough. And the thing is that on a Rift Guardian, you have to equip the Kane's Helm if you want to do the swap, because this is the whole point of the setup, to go Sengoku. And maybe at the season start, because it's the Helix gift, you can also go Sengoku. But generally, this is used for the swap. And what you do is you equip the Kane's Helm, and you also swap your Avarice ring to Convention of Elements. And you can even put in the Bane of the Stricken if you want. And the good thing is that Convention will start on cold, and then after 4 seconds, it will go to fire. So essentially, you do the swap when the Rift Guardian spawns, and then as the Convention switches to fire, the Rift Guardian becomes active, and you can blast them with Convention and so on. And it won't really matter that you don't have the Soken's Grace, for example. So typically I like 2 or 3 shots the Rift Guardian. Sometimes you can probably even one-shot him, and it shouldn't be such a big deal as long as your squirts doesn't drop and you have the Convention as well. Other than that, the setup is very similar here, just we have to include the Sweeping Wind, because this gives you the damage multiplier for the Sengoku set. So you have to stack this up to 13, which comes from the Vengeful Wind weapon that gives you the 10 stacks extra, and like this you get all the damage. So make sure it doesn't drop. It has a duration of only 6 seconds, and you have to hit something in those 6 seconds to keep it up. Otherwise you have to press it. Sometimes when you run to the next level, you have to press it manually because there's no enemies nearby. Just make sure it doesn't drop, and keep an eye on it, but you will get the muscle memory for it eventually. And that's about it for the 2 setups. I have the D3 panel links in the description, so go check them out, and you can see all the details of the build. So generally you want to stack a little bit of cooldown and resource cost reduction, and otherwise just like the typical crit rolls, fire damage rolls, and that's about it. So the build is quite straightforward to play. As I said, you just try to find like the first elite, so you dash around a bit, and once you have the Ingeon buff, you can dash really fast, and when you see like big packs of enemies, you can just blast them quickly. Otherwise just dash to the next elite, pick the Death Breath, pick the globes, keep going, and if you keep up the pace, you shouldn't really have too much trouble keeping up the Ingeon buff. And this is all there is, and you keep up your buffs, as you can press the blind for the extra damage here and there, and then you press the mantra every once in a while, especially on the Sengoku setup where there's no standing archers. So you can just press the mantra every few seconds to make sure your squirts doesn't drop, because if the squirts drops, it's times 2 multiplier. It's quite good to have this damage, and yeah, make sure you press the mantra often enough. It lasts only 3 seconds, so whenever there's like something dangerous coming at you, or some elemental effects, some molten on the ground or electrified, so essentially whenever you find an elite, you definitely want to press the mantra just to make sure that you have the shield. And with gold wrap, they will never get through it, and it should be fine. And that's it for this guide. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you guys next time.